From baggage claim to pajamas in 10 minutes. Erie International Airport. Fly with ERI.com.
Fly Erie International Airport to Charlotte on American Airlines, your nonstop gateway to the world. Also, we have Breeze Airways flying nonstop to Orlando and Tampa, Florida. A great low-cost carrier providing excellent service to the regional community. Fly Erie International for your travel needs.
Fly with ERI.com.
All year round, Frontier Home Products and Design has what you need to make your home comfortable and beautiful. Relax on a new timber tech deck designed by Frontier's experts. A new fireplace from Frontier Home Products Fireplace Gallery adds warmth and serenity to any home. Beauty and versatility at Frontier Home Products and Design Center, 4213 Peachtree, East 5th, next to the Bayfront Highway.
Frontier Home Products and Design Center. Discover a new frontier.
PA contractor number PA039007.
Welcome to TalkErie.com's Joel Natale Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast. Every day, we tackle the biggest issues that the Erie, PA region faces. Stay informed and involved as we advance the narrative of Erie. Now, here's Joel Natale.
We've got an amazing dignitary on the phone with us here. Erie's favorite son, Steve Scully, the host of the briefing on POTUS, Sirius XM. Steve, welcome back to the show.
It is a great pleasure and honor. I'm not sure. I think Tom Ridge is Erie's favorite, and maybe Train. There's some other bigger names, but it's great to be with you.
You got it here. This is such an appropriate timing for our conversation as I saw something in the Philadelphia Inquirer today. Are we sick of, all the attention here in Pennsylvania? And I'm thinking, I'm not too sick of the attention here. So today I'm talking to you. Tomorrow I'm talking to the Italians. I've got the Australians calling in the afternoon. I mean, it's astounding, how much interest in Erie County there is in this election.
I have been covering national campaigns since 1992, and every 4 years we'd go up to New Hampshire, first in the nation, and they're just inundated with coverage, and the people of New Hampshire love it. And I'm thinking to myself, Pennsylvania deserves this, Erie deserves this, it's Pennsylvania, 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 and I think it's great. I mean, look, you've had no shortage of dignitaries coming to Erie. I know Governor Walz is there as we speak, and of course you've had the principals, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Trump has been to Erie, 5 times since 2016?
Something like
that. And all of the other people, and Liz Cheney, who came just about 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's great. I mean, I do wish that there were probably 15 or 20 battleground states. We only have 7. And I think based on the polling, we're looking at now 3 or 4. And I think you're going to see an inundation of ads, as you've already seen in Pennsylvania, but also a final blitz by the campaigns over the next 72 hours.
Can we talk about the mechanics of this, of who the campaigns are eliciting? Are they going for their base, or is there still this kind of unicorn voter that's, maybe 4 to 6% that's just maybe checked out, or maybe is just checking in right now?
And I was mentioning this today on my program, they're not undecided. Let's be honest. At this stage of the game, everyone has an opinion on Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. You either like or dislike those candidates, but you have an opinion. What they're going after, first of all, this is a base election for both campaigns. They've got to get out their base, and admittedly, Kamala Harris is having some trouble among a key part of her base. She doesn't have the polling numbers that Joe Biden had 4 years ago among black men, which is why she's been so diligent in going after those people and Gen Z. Mm-hmm. But the undecideds, as they're called, and I don't view them as undecided, they're the persuadables. They're the people that are not as consumed as you and I are every day, focusing every poll and every ad and every step or misstep. They're out there doing their things as they should do. They're raising their kids, going to soccer games, trying to figure out how to pay for the bills, and they may watch a little bit of television and catch some of the news stories. Those people, do they go to the polls on Tuesday? Have they gone to the polls? More than 40 million Americans have cast their ballots, which is an incredible number.
Wow.
But the people who have not yet cast their ballots are those who either don't care, don't want to get involved, don't think that their vote is going to count. By the way, Pennsylvania, it counts, so make sure you vote. Regardless of how you vote, get out there and vote. Erie County, all eyes are going to be on you. But it's the persuadables. It's those people that, just don't really care, but yeah, maybe I'll vote. And look, it's easier than ever. I live in Virginia, Joel. 45 days of early voting in Virginia. Wow. I mean, there's no reason not to vote. And I know Pennsylvania has an antiquated system, and gosh, I hope that they change that. I know, let's be honest, Republicans in Harrisburg have tried to restrict voting because they know that if they make it more difficult for people to vote, then they win. So there are a lot of changes that the Commonwealth needs to make, but at this stage of the game, it's getting those people to get them off the couch to the polling booth or mail their ballot before the deadlines.
I want you, again, you have covered this your entire career. I want you to do a pre-Trump and a post-Trump era analysis here. Because I remember when George W. Bush, flew into North Coast Air, to the hangar with Tom Ridge in 2000, to do a fly-in campaign event in Erie. That's how it used to be. You flew in, you did something in a hangar, and you flew right out. And the reporters from like the Buffalo News came to cover it because they weren't going to get any love from the campaigns. But all through that era, the Pennsylvania was a desired state, yet Democrats usually won. I mean, there was a lot of Democrat wins on a Commonwealth-wide basis. And then Trump hits, and Trump changes it. What are your thoughts on that? Am I accurate in saying this used to be the bridge too far for a lot of Republican candidates, but then Trump has kind of mixed this thing up? And now, I mean, some people think that he has the momentum in PA right now.
Well, he has clearly realigned the Republican Party, because you mentioned Tom Ridge and George W. Bush, and I covered Reagan when I was at WSEE when he came to Erie to campaign, and I remember George H.W. Bush coming to GE in 1984 and having the chance to interview Bush that year. So those so-called Reagan Democrats that then went to Bill Clinton and kind of were leaning towards George W. Bush, but went to Al Gore in 2000, they're coming back to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump has been a very effective campaigner. Look, he's a brilliant PR guy. Yesterday, going in that garbage truck, I mean, let's be honest, it was a pretty good photo op. Going to that McDonald's outside of Philadelphia, I mean, it was a really good photo op. Regardless of whether you like or dislike Trump, he knows how to capture the news cycle. And he's always said, bad PR is still good PR. They're talking about me. Yeah. But I think what we've seen, and the question is going to be, what happens after Trump? So if Trump loses on Tuesday, does the party revert back to the more Chamber of Commerce focused on fiscal issues and strong defense and lower government? Or do they realign, as Trump has, with more like a J.D. Vance? We don't know the answer to that. But we do know that Trump has been very effective in trying to create a coalition that includes traditional Democratic voters that are now aligned with Donald Trump. And you said the momentum is with him. It could be, there are polls out there that show Harris is up slightly, other polls that give the edge to Donald Trump. I've often said polls are like crack cocaine for political journalists.
Right.
I mean, we're inundated with them. Mm-hmm. They were wrong in 2012. They showed a tight race. Obama won easily. Mm-hmm. They were right in 2016 nationally. There just wasn't enough polling in key states like Pennsylvania. And they were off in 2022 during the midterm election. So we'll see if the polls are right or wrong. It's great to talk about them. It's interesting. It's fun. But as the cliche often says, the only poll that counts is the one on Election Day.
Well, and it sounds like that we would need to admit that something fundamentally has changed in the electorate in Pennsylvania, insofar as to be able to activate those blue-collar Democrats to vote for a Republican like Donald J. Trump, and because he's a different Republican. He's not a Arlen Specter. He's not a Toomey.
Well, and you look at the neighbors to the west in Ohio. Ohio was a battleground state. It is now pretty solid Republican. Yeah. Sherrod Brown in a tough re-election battle. Florida, remember back in 2000, Tim Russert, Florida. Well, now it's Pennsylvania, because, again, what we've seen, especially in places like Erie, that have lost a lot of the industrial base and you have a poverty rate of 25% in the city of Erie.
Yep.
And so you have a lot of disaffected voters that feel that Washington is out of touch with them. And Donald Trump has been very effective in trying to appeal to those voters. Now, if you look at it, I mean, Joe Biden has done, a fairly good job in trying to rebuild infrastructure. All the metrics, new numbers out today with, inflation now at about 2%. Gas prices are down. Unemployment at a record low level. There's investments in energy. But people are not feeling that. And that's the biggest challenge right now that Kamala Harris continues to struggle with.
What do you and your guests say on the briefing on Sirius XM when you're talking about this? 29% of the electorate thinks we're on the right track. To me, that's the killer stat. Is that if you want to understand why people are so sour right now, it's that whole thing of we're not going in the right direction. They see the foreign wars. They see some of the craziness in some of the social policies as well, and they're like, "Geez, I'm not sure I signed up for this." You guys talk about that a lot.
We do, and I love to do historical perspectives. I just did a town hall meeting with Doris Kearns Goodwin, who's been to Erie. She's become really a good friend, and we had a long talk about what we saw in the 1930s. That was the America First movement that was led by Charles Lindbergh. Wow. We just got off of World War II. We've been making all this investments into Germany. Let's put that money back home. We're getting over the Great Depression, and let's focus on America. And, of course, it wasn't until the Japanese attacked us in Pearl Harbor that we got into World War II, and then, of course, the country united around that. In our lifetime, that was our 9/11. We came together as a country, even briefly, because of what happened. But I think there's a couple of things out there, just as I talk to people around the country. First of all, it's COVID. COVID had changed a generation of Americans. It's changed the way we work. It's changed the way we talk to each other. It's changed our economy. So it's actually, people kind of rethinking their own lives, their own careers, their own mortality. So that's part of it. The other thing is, I think you mentioned these foreign wars, and you look at what's happening, for example, in the Gaza Strip. I mean, Joel, that's going to cost tens of billions of dollars to rebuild the Gaza Strip. We're providing billions of dollars in aid to Israel. We're seeing what's happened with Ukraine. Where the hell is Ukraine? Why are we spending all this money in Ukraine? And by the way, I think it's an important investment, but I'm telling you, that's what people are saying. Why not spend the money here? Why not invest in our own roads and bridges? And why not deal with the border and fentanyl and all this other stuff? So that is the mindset, but we've been here before. We were here in the 1930s. And we're here today, and in many ways, Donald Trump is the Charles Lindbergh of this era, because he's been very effective in really trying to double down on the issues that he says are important to people that are just blue-collar, run-of-the-mill workers that are struggling to make ends meet, that feel grumpy or unhappy about the direction of the country. And it doesn't help that you've got an 82-year-old man in the White House who, clearly made the right decision by, stepping down after one term. This would be a very different race had he been at the top of the ticket. And, oh, by the way, had there not been that debate June 27th, he still would be at the top of the ticket. So think about that.
And I'm pretty sure that he thinks he would be doing better than his vice president. Again, we don't know where this is going to all end up, but there seems to be some buyer's remorse, or seller's remorse, I should probably say. Steve Scully's our guest here. He is a host of Sirius XM. What is that, Steve, 126?
124.
124.
124.
Yes, POTUS is the channel. Yeah, and you got a good lead in with Michael what is that?
Smirkanish. So, here's the deal.
Yes.
He's got everything east of Harrisburg. I have everything west of Harrisburg.
Yes,
that's our agreement. That's how we get along.
That's great that you have that kind of coverage of PA. And then who comes on after you at 2:00?
Then we have Dan Abrams, and then Julie Mason from 3 to 6, and then Real Clear Politics, and then The Hill from News Nation. That
is just a powerhouse radio channel there on Sirius XM. You wanted to mention something here about these candidates trying to make their last arguments, yet stuff is taking the news cycle over, and so. Trump was ready to go Saturday night at Madison Square Garden with all those thousands of people inside. He must have been at the height of his of his ecstasy there, and then this crazy thing with this stupid comic. Go ahead.
So here's why he wanted to do MSG. Back in the 1970s, Howard Cosell did an event introducing Frank Sinatra. Donald Trump has always wanted to replicate. He's a huge Sinatra fan. He played his song at the end of the rally, but he wanted to replicate 22,000 people inside the Garden, even though New York is not a battleground state. But it was a smart move because it did get a lot of attention, albeit a lot of comedians beforehand stepped on the story,
yes.
Which is also why on Tuesday people said, why is Kamala Harris going to be in Washington, D.C.? Well, the optics, and of course it was a gorgeous evening. I mean, Erie's been the same. I mean, it's been an incredibly warm fall. So you had a terrific evening, 75,000 people on the ellipse of the mall, the backdrop, of course, the South Portico of the White House, and a very good, well-written, well-delivered, tight script by Kamala Harris, her closing argument. The problem was the optics of 1,000 feet away inside the Oval Office is the current president of the United States, Joe Biden, on a Zoom call with Latino voters, and of course, a gaffe. I don't think he meant it, but it was certainly a gaffe, and Trump pounced on it. And, I mean, the optics of that, I know because I've talked to the Kamala Harris campaign staff, they were not happy.
No.
You had this great event, and the next day they're not talking about the event per se. They're talking about Joe Biden referring to half the country, Trump supporters, as garbage and trying to do a cleanup on Oval Office. And it was just a great juxtaposition.
Yeah, I mean, basically both campaigns had to deal with these distractions there instead of kind of managing the news cycles. All right, so again, you are a news junkie. I want you to take us from here into Tuesday and really beyond, because don't you think there's going to be some significant message handling, late at night, Tuesday night, midnight, and then as we wake up on Wednesday morning on the Today Show or Good Morning America? People are going to be really trying to handle and manage that message. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think between now and Monday, Trump will say something stupid. There could be something else with the Kamala Harris campaign, and there will be, a flurry of news coverage depending on what that is. I don't expect any major October surprise. I'm reminded back in 2000, it was the weekend before the election, that we found out about George W. Bush's DUI, which did have an impact. I don't think, we're going to see something like that. And even if we did, everything is so baked in because of the early voting. Here's my advice to your listeners is to keep in mind Georgia results will come in pretty early on Tuesday evening. Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, 3 battleground states, and we'll have a good indication of how the returns are coming in as to how that state is going to go. So I think somebody referred to Georgia as Trump's Pennsylvania because he needs to win Georgia. Pennsylvania is Kamala Harris's Pennsylvania. She must win Pennsylvania. No Democrat. You have to go back to 1948. Harry Truman was the last Democrat to win the White House and not win Pennsylvania. Wow. So keep an eye on counties like Erie, Bucks County. What's the total in Allegheny County? What's the total in the greater Philadelphia area? How does that compare to 4 years ago? Steve Kornacki is going to be with me tomorrow, kind of breaking down all of the different counties in the Commonwealth that he's going to be watching, Erie among them, to say, okay, this is going to give me an indication. So I don't think we're going to know Tuesday night, but I do think we're going to know Wednesday at some point, whether it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon or midnight on Wednesday. I think by Wednesday we'll have a pretty good idea. If we don't, then what's going to happen, Joel, is that the lawyers are going to get involved. Mm-hmm. And it could be Harrisburg, it could be, in Wisconsin or Michigan or North Carolina, but there could be a state that could be reminiscent of what we saw in Florida back in 2000.
Wow.
I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that we have a clean, clear, decisive victory, and whoever wins, you try to bring the country together, because let me just say this at the outset. Half the country is going to be ticked off when the election returns are finalized. Either the Trump supporters are going to cry foul, the Harris supporters will be up in arms and crying, so half of the country will be ticked off. The half that's ticked off, it's going to be hard, it's going to be a bitter pill to swallow. But, I had J. Michael Ludig, who was a conservative lawyer and judge. He was on my program. You might remember him from the Jan 6 hearings. Mm-hmm. And I played some concession speeches from Richard Nixon in 1960 saying we need to stand behind President-elect John F. Kennedy. Think about that in 1960. You had Al Gore in 2000 after the Bush v. Gore, fervently disagreeing with the Supreme Court ruling, but he supported President-elect George W. Bush. We have got to get back to that. And if Kamala Harris is elected president, I would hope that Donald Trump finally does the right thing and tries to bring the country together, because this divisiveness and the rhetoric, it's got to stop. It just has to stop. I think the country is just exhausted from both parties with all that's happened. Let's focus on the country, the future, and try to move forward if we can.
Yeah, I mean, even this week, Steve, I feel like just the rhetoric has devolved into just something so wrong. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It feels like I'm not going to say that we're tearing apart, that we're 1859 again. That's not what I'm saying. But it is as bad as I've ever seen it. It doesn't seem to be any allusion to decorum at all, unfortunately.
No, and I put a lot of that blame on Donald Trump.
Yeah,
because he talks about trying to bring the country together, but he's referred to immigrants as vermin. He's referred to the U.S. as a garbage country taking in all these immigrants. I mean, his rhetoric and his tone, and look, there's been some sharp things by Kamala Harris, but I think if you look at it objectively, and I'm not here to endorse or support Kamala Harris or to endorse Donald Trump, but I think if you look at it, I think Kamala Harris in her speech. I want my critics to have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. Team of rivals, Doris Kearns Goodwin, Abraham Lincoln. Yes, what we need in this country, Joel, we need two really strong political parties that are going to fight over issues, and we saw that with Liz Cheney. I had a conversation with her before the event, which, by the way, just was amazing at the Bayfront Convention Center, and it's getting still about 14,000 views, according to Fergie Ferrardi from the Jefferson. So people are watching that. But, I asked you, so let's assume Trump loses. What does 2025 look like for your party? Mm-hmm. And she said, we need to get back to what are our principles? Lower government, strong defense, cut taxes, bring down the debt and the deficit, individual liberty. I mean, basically, that's what the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush, that's what they stood for over the years. And they need to get back to that and then, fight the dickens over the issues and try to find ways to come together, because this country was formed on compromise.
Get paid to drive. Start a new career behind the wheel at the EMTA. If you are looking for a high-paying and rewarding career with full benefits and paid training, stop by or apply online today with the EMTA. Plus, EMTA riders can now enjoy free Wi-Fi on new, clean, and environmentally friendly buses to travel all over Erie County. Visit ridethee.com for more information.
Get on board EMTA. Get on board EMTA. Get on board.
Quickfill gasoline is made right here in America. United Refining Company, who operates Quickfill, refines its gasoline from North American crude oil in Warren, Pennsylvania. When you buy United Refining Company gasoline at Quickfill, you keep jobs and businesses in America. And you keep American families strong. You don't need to send your money overseas when you buy gasoline. Buy American-made gasoline at Quickfill. Quickfill, driving America.
Steve, who's the most interesting person you talked to this week? Because you talk to people every week, but who is really super interesting this week?
I just pre-taped an interview that's going to air tomorrow with Senator John Thune, and it's interesting because he is vying to become the next Senate Republican leader to replace Mitch McConnell. I think he's got the edge to get there. And the one thing I asked him, which is in this town in Washington, the political divide is often sharper between the House and the Senate than it is between Democrats and Republicans. And so if likely in divided government, how you deal with some of the big issues. If you think about what we have going on next year, the Trump-era tax cuts have got to be dealt with. Raising the debt limit. The national debt right now, approaching $36 trillion, expected to get to $50 trillion in the next 8 to 10 years. You've got to shore up Medicare and Social Security. You got to figure out ways to cut government spending, because right now we're spending more on interest on the debt than on defense spending. Yeah. So a number of big issues that they've got to come together. My guess is, regardless of who's president, we will have divided government next year, and Congress, which has not passed a budget on time since 1996, better get its act together.
There's no doubt about it. And, I say it all the time. Somehow we figured it out with Bill Clinton in the White House and Newt Gingrich as the Speaker of the House. And we had 2 years of balanced budget and surpluses. It wasn't like the economy was so much better. I mean, don't you think that could be within the realm, or are we just going to have to totally fundamentally change how we construct this government?
Oh, no. I think you're right. I mean, just take one issue, immigration, okay?
Yeah.
Both parties have had control of the White House, the House, and the Senate, and they haven't done anything. The only way you're going to get something done on immigration is in divided government, where you have a compromise that both sides come together and realize that they got to solve the problem. And we had that this year, but of course it was killed in an election year. Next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, speaking as a citizen, not as a journalist, it will get resolved, because every president, really from Bill Clinton and George W. Bush to Joe Biden and Barack Obama, regretted that they couldn't cross the finish line on that issue.
Wow. I want you to talk to this concept of, we talk a lot about the left and the right, Republicans and Democrats, but there are other binaries that are happening with the electorate, and there is this sense of coastal elites and the great unwashed in the middle of the country. And I count myself as unwashed. No, I mean, the seriousness of, the reason why Trump is so attractive to a working class Democrat is because the elites have some interesting ideas about, how life should be in America, and they kind of reject it. I make it akin to the Tullio Democrat versus some of the more progressive Democrats that we have around here in Erie, PA.
Which is why, with Kamala Harris, even though she had a huge crowd with Beyonce 6 days ago in Houston, Beyonce did not perform. They're being very careful and very cautious to not make the mistake that Hillary Clinton made in 2016 with these huge events and huge rallies and big celebrities and rollout, because they realize, to your point, we've got to appeal to that working class voter who lives on Poplar Street in Erie and is doing the overnight shift at Wabtec, or is, cleaning hospitals at Hammett or St. Vincent. They've got to go after that traditional Democratic base voter that very much is lining itself up with Donald Trump.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about it. Do you think that she's made the case? I mean, I know that she likes to start her conversations with, I grew up in a middle-class family. I'm just wondering, given that she's what came out of San Francisco with her political career, is that hitting the mark? Do you think she's got the right tone?
Well, I think she did on Tuesday. I think her speech Tuesday, by any measure, was a home run. Here's the problem. She's only been a candidate for less than 110 days.
Yeah.
Had this played out differently, the way I think it should have played out, and I had a conversation with President Bush about this a year and a half ago, if Joe Biden announced back in the summer of 2023 that he is not going to run for re-election, he's going to focus on the last 18 months of his presidency on policy issues,
right,
let the Democratic Party then go after, have a contested primary, I think we'd have a different situation. I think having a heated primary makes you a stronger candidate in the general election. So that's been her big challenge.
Do you think that had Joe Biden pulled out last year, that Donald Trump would have necessarily run? I mean, these are really hypotheticals. You think that there's
I think he would have run. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, no, he still would have stayed in the race because he was going to get the nomination. So look, if you get the nomination, you got a 50-50 chance of becoming president of the United States. But I think had Joe Biden dropped out last summer, not this summer, and you had a primary that, hypothetically could have included, Gavin Newsom and maybe Gretchen Whitmer and maybe Josh Shapiro or other people, that's not to say that Kamala Harris still would not have been the nominee. She would have had the edge as a vice president, but she would have been tested, her message, her skills, because as you look at Kamala Harris from June, July to where she is today, again, objectively looking at it, she's a much better candidate now than she was when she first started. She has much more confidence in herself, and that would have grown in a contested primary. And we've seen that in the past. George Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Donald Trump in 2016, when they've been tested by fire in a primary and get through that, they're a stronger candidate in the general election.
There's no doubt about it. as a matter of fact, if you remember when President Biden said, "I'm getting out," the first notes out of people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama were, they weren't necessarily saying let's open it up, but let's be deliberate. Like, they weren't instantly jumping to Kamala Harris. And this is what is a head scratcher to me is Kamala Harris was really having a hard time with her approval ratings just 6 months ago. I mean, like, I mean, that she was really coming from a baseline not very favorable for her. What do you think happened there? Were they just told everybody's got to get in line? I mean, Democrats do that very well of just quickly coalescing,
Well, a couple things happened. First of all, very early, even though Joe Biden, within a matter of half hour after announcing he's not going to run, issued his support for Kamala Harris. But the other big heavy hitters, like the Nancy Pelosi's, very careful to kind of step back to let the process unfold because they did not want this to look like it was going to be a coronation.
Right.
But very quickly, literally within 48 hours, she was the presumptive nominee. The one story that's going to be fascinating when it comes out next year, Amy Parnes, a good friend of mine, is what happened between Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. Because it wasn't until you had the letter by George Clooney that really stirred a lot of this. And, of course, that moment on MSNBC after Biden said, I'm in the race, and Nancy Pelosi said, so what about Joe Biden? He needs to make a decision. Well, Madam Speaker, he's made a decision. He's staying in the race. Well, we want to give him space to make the decision. It's kind of like, we're having chicken tonight. What do you want for dinner? Well, I want steak. Well, we're having chicken, so what do you want? I mean, it's just one of those moments.
Yeah. Her Italian-ness came out on that one. That's me talking, right? That sounds like my Italian mother.
Don't fool with mother.
Don't fool with mother. Exactly. Steve Scully is on the line with us. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there literally was some significant backroom politics going on there. I want to pivot to the media. Obviously. Who was it that was? Jeff Bezos in his commentary in the Washington Post is saying this is why we're not going to endorse a candidate, which I thought was shocking that both the LA Times and the Post weren't doing this year. But he's saying,
I have it right in front of me. I have it right in front of me. Was there any Americans do not trust the media? Right here in front of me.
Lower than Congress now. What can, again, you are part and parcel of understanding that environment, the Beltway and so on. What needs to happen here?
Here's the problem. The good news is that there's more news and information out there than ever before, and you're emblematic of that. I work for a network that has hundreds of radios, hundreds of channels. The bad news is there's a lot of misinformation out there, and so what we have is a very polarized country who is gravitating towards the news site that reaffirms their point of view. I'd like to consider, like you, a good consumer of news, so I'm going to watch Sean Hannity, and I'm going to watch Rachel Maddow, and I'm going to listen to NPR, and I'm going to, really digest, Wall Street Journal and New York Times editorial pages and the Washington Post. But the problem is most Americans don't have the time or the interest or the inclination to do that. The other part of it is what you're seeing in Erie, and it's really sad. I mean, the Erie Times News, it had a morning and evening newspaper when I was a kid. It's a shell of what it used to be. They have, a handful of reporters covering the city and the county. Yeah. There's hardly anything in it. And so then it becomes this double-edged sword. People aren't buying the newspaper, and so if people don't buy the newspaper, they can't hire the staff, and it just becomes withering on the vine. And so it's a sad state of the local media across the country, but especially in small and mid-sized cities like Erie.
You know what is the biggest shock, and again, it brings me great sadness that we lost a pillar like Pat Howard, for example. People are looking for an opinion leader. Help me understand how I should feel about a thing. And the wonderful thing about Pat, whether you agreed with him or not, is that he had a very thoughtful and well-informed approach to local issues, right? And the darndest thing that has happened with that paper since Gannett took over is not only do we not have local opinions on a regular basis, we don't have national opinions. I grew up like you reading George Will and Eugene Robinson and all of those amazing Washington Post columnists. Did I agree with them all? No, but I learned from their opinions. I think opinion is almost as important as the hard news, Steve.
No, I totally agree. I mean, Ed Mead was a true newspaper guy, and he kept that newspaper alive with the Mead family. And one of my favorite moments. Think about this. One of the years back in the early 2000s, I brought Ed to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and he and Ben Bradley having a conversation. I mean, Ben Bradley, of course, legendary at the Washington Post, but the two of them really growing up as newspapermen. And if I could have just eavesdropped on that conversation, but they were animated. The bourbon was flowing, so they were drinking and enjoying it, so it was fun. Yeah. But afterwards, but unfortunately, we don't have those kind of people anymore because it's all owned by these large corporations. It's all bottom line. And, local ownership is so important when it comes to the media. And you saw that in Erie with the Lamb family that owned WICU and with Jet 24. And that's all gone.
Amazing stuff. The concept of people getting their news from TikTok, from just some schmo who's opinionated. It just is it's a scary thought. Do you think that we can maybe not put the genie back in the bottle, but maybe bring more informed voices to the fore, like your show? I mean, I feel like your show is jam-packed with the hard news, with the first sources, so that people can listen, and it's on a new platform, it's on a new channel, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you want it, it's out there. There is, and I was actually sad to see about 250,000 people have canceled their subscription to the Washington Post. I did not. Right. Because I think it's an important newspaper, and I also want to support the newspaper and the reporters who cover it. But if you want it, Joel, it's out there. And as I tell, when I speak to student groups, journalism students, I tell them no credible journalist at CBS News or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal goes out there to put out misinformation. Credibility is the most important thing. Do we make mistakes? Of course. I make mistakes all the time, and you own those mistakes, and you say, hey, I made a mistake, and here are the facts on that story, you correct it. But that's incumbent on us to try to go after news sources like your program that presents all points of view, agree or disagree. You can beat us up on social media, but I don't go out with an agenda. I go out to present the facts as I see them. Sometimes I'll express an opinion. Sometimes I'll provide some analysis, or I'll provide context. This is what Donald Trump said now. This is what he said back in 2016, or whatever. But then you can decide. And if you don't like the program, the good news is turn the channel and watch something else.
Last 2 minutes with Steve Scully here from Erie native and host of the briefing at POTUS, Sirius XM. All right, Erie, Pennsylvania, Tuesday night. We're definitely all the number crunchers are going to be watching this county. I think they even know us down to, you talking to Carl Rove, he knows the precincts, for goodness sake. He knows the difference between, the 5th Ward and the 1st Ward and maybe Harbor Creek or Fairview. It's astounding. But they're watching Erie, aren't they?
They are. And, of course, Kamala Harris needs to run up the numbers in the city. We'll see how Donald Trump does in places like Corey and Mill Creek and Harbor Creek. And the good news is that the election day numbers will be up pretty early. The big question is there going to be a red mirage and a blue wave? I think that the numbers will be coming in a lot faster. I know, based on what Governor Shapiro had told me on the program, that they'll start counting 7 a.m. on Election Day. Again, I wish they had a better system in Pennsylvania. Right. But I think we'll have the results in Pennsylvania by mid to late day Wednesday, certainly Thursday at the latest. Hey, before we leave, though, by the way, we are Penn State, big game Saturday. Yes. Happy Valley, go Penn State, beat Ohio. This is your year. Come on and do it.
This is absolutely it. One good thing that we're seeing in our election office, and again, they've been slogging through some issues that they've had with their vendors, is that they did have some preliminary mail numbers literally within minutes after the 8 o'clock closing of the polls. And so they are starting to, they flipped the script where they're showing mail numbers as best as they can early on, and so maybe we'll see some precincts coming together. I really, really appreciate you taking all this time, Steve Scully.
Joel.
I mean, my goodness, and let's give a pitch to the Jefferson Global Summit events that you'll be at.
Yeah. So it continues. Go to jeserie.org. A full lineup. Ferky and Ben and the team doing a terrific job. We have some great speakers after the election, including David Urban, who's from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, and Chris Matthews from MSNBC, and Tara Setmeyer, kind of breaking down the politics of the race. Bring your microphone up and talk to all of them. Joel will also have Lincoln historian Harold Holzer coming up. Eddie Glaude, you see him all the time on Morning Joe, coming to Erie. So a terrific lineup, and I'll be up there for that, but also before the election. So check it out. The Jefferson is truly a treasure for the community of Erie, and I appreciate Erie residents supporting it so much. I mean, it's something that the rest of the country looks at and says, wow, how can we have what Erie has?
There's no doubt. Steve Scully, again, listen to him on Sirius XM 124 POTUS channel, noon to 2 Eastern. Appreciate it, sir, very much.
You betcha. Go Penn State.
You've been listening to The Joel Natale Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast from TalkErie.com. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcatcher and get involved by emailing joel@TalkErie.com.